Welcome back to Active London 2021. I gave you a bit of extra time, didn't I? Hopefully you got a couple extra cups of coffee or tea, whatever your tipple was at this time of the morning. But this session now is really important. We are focusing on young London, the community, the generation that makes our capital absolutely thrive. And we've got a great panel to be able to take you through that this morning. Because listen, COVID-19, it created so many situations for young people. They were isolated, there was no school, they were home learning. It was really tough on a lot of our young people, and it really did bring up the issue of mental health and what that meant for a lot of young people being isolated. It just wasn't a normal or natural environment. So what are we going to do about it? What do we have in our locker? What power do we have to be able to make sure that young London can get straight back in? So your panel, you saw them flash up just in front of you there. We've got Martin Talbot from the Dame Kelly Holmes Trust, Claire Bennett from the Commonwealth Games medalist, she's a Commonwealth Games medalist in fencing, and Hayley Jarvis and James Durkin from Mind Charity. So they're going to be coming up. I'm going to hand you over to London Sports Specialist Advisor for Children and Young People, and that's Gary Palmer.
Thank you, Jeanette. Good morning, everybody. At London Sports, our new London Moving strategy highlights our ambition to give all young Londoners the best opportunity to form a positive physical activity habit for life. The purpose for this is not just for physical well-being, but also to maintain and in many instances to improve the mental well-being of children and young people. I'm delighted this morning to be joined by four fantastic speakers who will be sharing some insight into how we can ensure that mental well-being is at the forefront of all of our work with children and young people. Our first two speakers, Hayley Jarvis and James Durkin, join us from Mind. Now, Mind is a mental health charity in England and Wales that was founded back in 1946. Mind provides advice and support to empower anyone experiencing a mental health problem. They also campaign to improve services, raise awareness, and promote understanding. Hayley and James, it's over to you.
Thanks, Gary, and thanks for having us today. It's really important that we're taking this time to stop and reflect on young people's mental health and the relationship that physical activity has in supporting it. So at Mind, and from the national team, we've been delivering programmes to support adult mental health for over 6 years. And in terms of young people, this is an emerging area of work for the national team. And so what we've done today is try to set the scene. So we've woven together mapping work that we completed prior to the pandemic with some of our recent CYP work completed through surveys, through interviews, through some data from COVID, to really share some initial thoughts about how sport and physical activity can tackle the emerging mental health emergency in young people, and share with you some of our plans for the rest of this year. So I think we all know we've all got mental health, and we are all on this continuum from thriving to surviving, from mental wellness or through to mental illness or mental health problems. When our mental health gets in the way, when it impacts on our relationships, when it impacts on our education, when it stops us doing things that we enjoy, that's when it becomes a problem, and we might need further help and support. So prior to the pandemic, we knew that sadly young people's mental health was declining. So in 2017, 1 in 9 children and young people had a mental health problem. 1 in 9 in 2017. There, as we can see on the slide, today in 2020, 1 in 6 children and young people have a mental health problem. And we know that childhood mental health is so important for adult mental health. So we know that half of all mental health problems are established by the age of 14. So half of all mental health problems are established by the age of 14. So it really shows the importance of those early years. That rises to 75% by the age of 24. And I reflect on my own mental health and my own mental health problems, very open about them. Those really become entrenched in my teenage years. So it's something that we, incredibly important that we support childhood mental health. In the UK, suicide is sadly the leading cause of death in young people, accounting for 14% of deaths in 10 to 19-year-olds. And we know that the number of young people sadly taking their lives has been increasing over the last 10 years. We also know between 2004 and 2020, anxiety, depression and self-harm all increase in children and young people. And we know that's important because self-harm can be a risk factor for suicide. So that we know around half of under 20s that go on to take their own life had self-harm previously to that. But we also know the severity of the mental health need, sadly, is also rising as well. So we're seeing more visits to A&E, more complex visits, and that's almost doubled in the last 5 years, the number of visits in terms of mental health problems in A&E. So we know the picture has been quite bleak, but how do young people talk about their mental health? So we know it's really rare that young people will explain their mental health using clinical terms. But instead, they talk to us about feeling angry or feeling frustrated. And actually, young people tell us that clinical language can be incredibly off-putting as they feel the stigma associated to using those clinical terms. We know there are many drivers in mental health problems in young people: low levels of education attainment, low paid work or difficulty finding work for young people, not being in education, employment or training, trauma. So going through something very stressful, very frightening or distressing can really impact at any age and cause long-lasting harm. But we also know there's lots of things going on in young people's lives. You know, there could be bullying, there could be physical health problems. We've heard in the media the long waiting lists for support, particularly for young people with mental health problems. So not meeting the criteria, the waiting list, family difficulties, social media, the good and the bad, loneliness and isolations, and that's been particularly exacerbated by the pandemic. But also, you know, sometimes mental health problems can just happen for no apparent reason. Okay, so moving on to the next slide. What's the impact of coronavirus on our mental health? So the peak of the coronavirus pandemic might have passed, but we know right now we're experiencing a mental health emergency. So the pandemic has worsened the existing trend of surging need around young people, particularly around young women. So we know young women aged 16 to 24 have been really severely infected, with 1 in 3 saying that they've experienced at least one mental health problem. So that's much more than usual. That lack of personal contact, as we've heard, with loved ones, the loneliness, the worry about getting coronavirus or spreading it has made young people's mental health worse, with 9 in 10 young people telling us that their mental health has got worse. We've also seen that young people have been more likely to use negative coping strategies, particularly around self-harm. The impact of not having private space in the house has been most acutely affected by young people. And we've seen over or under eating as a way to deal with those difficult thoughts and feelings. As you can see from the quote there, we're also seeing a trend around over-exercising as a way to deal and manage those feelings as well. Self-stigma is a huge issue for us, with young people telling us that they're not bad enough to receive, their mental health's not bad enough to receive help and support. But we also know that the pandemic has exacerbated existing inequalities when it comes to mental health. So it's really hit those that were just getting by the hardest, both economically and mentally. So particularly children growing up in households that have fallen behind in payments, more likely to have their mental health affected. Young people from racialised communities were more likely to have fallen behind or regressed at school. So it's been a really worrying landscape. But we also know that young people are telling us that they feel really hopeful for the future, and there is a role that we can all play in supporting their mental health. So what is this relationship between physical activity and mental health? Well, there is less research investigating the impact in children and young people, but the research that we do know is really promising. So we can see that exercise has a real positive impact on children's mental health. It's effective at treating depression and anxiety. And actually, the importance of exercise is mentioned in the NICE guidelines for a whole range of mental health disorders for young people. For those of you that are joining from the health profession, it's also a module on the Moving Medicine resource aimed at healthcare professionals. So to help you have those conversations with young people about how getting active can help support them. So we know it has a role in the prevention, but also in the treatment of mental health problems. And it's associated with a whole range of protective factors. So around mental wellbeing, positive individual and community development, positive mood, confidence and self-esteem, and that happiness, resilience and trust in others. We know from some of our recent insight work and our interviews with young people that they see physical activity as really beneficial, but one of the challenges is that they see it as a short-term solution. So those immediate benefits that we see from physical activity have both a positive and negative impact. So unlike other physical health conditions where it takes a long time to get those benefits through, we can sometimes feel the immediate benefits of physical activity, those feel-good endorphins, the dopamine, the serotonin. But young people are worried that it doesn't always stick. They feel that feeling and then it goes away. And those problems that they're dealing with in their daily life are still there. So it's really important that we really think about how we package up physical activity with a range of other support, like talking therapies, medication, and other lifestyle changes. But also that we create that really healthy relationship with physical activity. As we saw in that quote on the previous slide, over-exercising, particularly during the pandemic, has become an issue, particularly for some at-risk groups around particularly eating disorders. So it's important that we see it as more something that we look at holistically. So it's not just a sticking plaster. It's not a panacea for mental health support, that we look at physical activity in the whole as part of the treatment offer for young people. We can also see there the impact of not being able to play sport and physical activities having young people's mental health, with 67% of young people telling us that their mental health suffered as a result of not being able to go to the places they normally go to. Okay, so what is the role? When is it important to children and young people? So we can see that it's a really vital in both the treatment, but also in the prevention of mental health problems. And it can be a vital part of our self-care toolkit, particularly at times of stress. So thinking about transition, so that movement from primary school to secondary school to uni, also during exam time. So we know there's been some great projects. So England Athletics, #RunAndRevise, great example of a programme to get young people out in the build-up to exam times, running, talking, building those social connections to support their mental health. Many other programmes. We're going to hear in a moment from Dame Kelly Holmes Trust how they use physical activity and how it supports mental health outcomes. But Street Games, Youth Sport Trust are using physical activity as part of that, building that buffer for young people. Similar to adults, we know there's a massive correlation between lower physical activity levels and the risk of mental ill health. So the less active someone is, the more likely that they may develop a mental health problem in the future. And as we see in adults, it reduces the risk of depression by up to 30%. So it is that protective buffer. We've seen that there's been a change in attitudes to physical activity, particularly around young people during the lockdown. So this appreciation has increased. So the Youth Sports Trust survey said that despite lower levels of physical activity, because PE wasn't happening and clubs were closed, young people appreciate the importance during lockdown. And young people are told us they want to do more physical activity and exercise in the future as a result, because they've seen how important it is to help them manage their mental health. Our own research has shown that 57% of young people cope by being physically active during the pandemic. But also we know that coaches and the coaching workforce, so in that we definitely include PE teachers as well, are in a real position of trust to support young people's mental health. They can spot the signs and symptoms. Their awareness and the relationships with young people are vital. And some young people describe physical activity or sport to us as their safe haven. So I just wanted to share a quote from a young person. "I don't really talk to my friends or family about my problems. I sometimes speak to my football coach if things are getting too much. He suggested that I should consider speaking to a counsellor through the school, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that." And I think it's really vital that football coach is that person's safe haven, and it's great that they can spot the signs and signposts. So for us, it's really about supporting coaches to support others. So how are we responding to the mental health crisis at Mind? We've got a whole range of programmes led by our children and young people's team. We've got an active youth voice network of young people shaping our work. We work with schools, we work with mentally healthy universities, and our big campaign for government is Fund the Hubs, which is really calling on government to fund a network of early support hubs across England for 11 to 25-year-olds to make sure they've got somewhere to go to when they're first struggling with their mental health. We've got partnerships with education providers such as Twinkle, and in the sports and physical activity team, we've invested in audience insights, and we've shared some extracts from this today. So I think it's a perfect time to hand you over to James, who will share some more about our emergent work in this space. Over to James.
Thank you very much, Hayley. Brilliant. Just going to share my slides. Perfect. So as Hayley said, targeted work with children and young people is an emerging work area for both Mind and many others across the sector. Back in 2019, we commissioned stakeholder mapping to uncover how we could best support children and young people's mental health using physical activity. And this work led to some key recommendations for us, including involving young people with lived experience of mental health in future scoping research. In April 2021, Mind launched its strategy. So we're supporting young people with a focus on trauma being a strategic development priority. At the same time, our team launched its current CYP workforce project. Our main goal is to co-design and then to pilot focused resources to help the workforce to better understand and support people at risk of or experiencing mental health problems. And today we're going to share some of those key learnings that help you in your own organisations. Well, at Mind, like I said, we work closely with individuals with lived experience, involving them in the design and delivery of our work. And if you're interested in this, you're welcome to go and visit our toolkit guides, which are on our website, including Guide 3, which is specifically about lived experience. Well, co-design was at the heart of our project. So to engage young people at all stages, we set up a young people steering group. We've empowered 13 young people with lived experience, giving them the opportunity to feed into the decision-making, whether that be the objective setting or the evaluation. They will help to co-design resources with us. And as importantly, they've helped to provide valuable insights into how the workforce can support their mental well-being. During this project, we've also gathered further insights by consulting other groups of young people. And alongside this, over the summer, we launched a survey for the physical activity workforce to evaluate current understanding and confidence levels. All this research has helped us to identify the key areas where the workforce would like upskilling on and the best ways to provide this additional training, information, and support. From this, we've drawn out 3 key recommendations that you can apply within your own organisation and in your roles. Firstly, as we've touched on, it's imperative that you engage and co-design with young people, ensuring that your work and activities are young people centred. A large number of those working or volunteering with young people raised fears in our survey that they were concerned that young people wouldn't know how to communicate when they were struggling. When exploring this with our steering group, our young people strongly advocated for coaches to take an approachable and open-minded attitude. They stressed that coaches should not incorporate their own assumptions into teaching or conversations around mental health. Rather, coaches should be open to new ideas and work with young people to create safe spaces to have these conversations. Secondly, we strongly recommend that you take a holistic approach to supporting the mental well-being of your young people. The research we've undertaken in the last year has shown that young people view sport as a short-term solution. The young people on our steering group have reiterated this on many occasions and highlighted that engaging in physical activity can also become a problem. We should take caution when working with individuals that may be at risk of experiencing eating disorders or more addictive behaviours such as over-exercising. Moreover, though, we need to all ensure that the right support is available, as physical activity programmes alone will not end the mental health crisis. Finally, we can all do more to ensure that physical activity sessions are mental health friendly. In the same way that we would warm up at the start or cool down at the end of a session, young people want the opportunity to unwind mentally. Our steering group have provided many examples of simple steps that you could implement with a young person in a physical activity setting. For example, could you try to incorporate wellbeing focused activities, such as meditation or mindfulness, into a warm-up or a warm-down? Young people also stress the importance of taking time to understand the individual's goals and their mindset. Instead of assuming what physical activity or mental health benefits a participant wants to get out of a session, provide an opportunity for the young person to explore this themselves so you can adapt your session plans accordingly. We'll be sharing many more top tips and also some important signposting information as we move further into this project. But having gathered a great deal of insights, we're going to be now co-designing these resources for the sector and including yourselves. At this stage, we're actually not being prescriptive about the form of resource, as the design phase will be led by young people and those working to support them. From our research, though, it's clear that there's an opportunity to provide support to the sector by streamlining messages around the support available to young people. So anyone working with these groups can clearly signpost to services. Alongside signposting, the workforce has also stressed that it wants to know more about how to adapt activities and around the different challenges mental health conditions that young people are facing. So definitely watch this space over the upcoming months as we start to pilot and roll out our recommendations and resources, many of which you'll find on our website. And alongside our website, which is at mind.org.uk/sport, we also have a whole host of resources that you can access now. If you're interested in finding out more about our Children and People's Workforce project, but also about our wide-ranging work with the sports sector and our universal offer, do sign up to our monthly e-newsletter, which is and you can do this by emailing sport@mind.org.uk. You can also access our 10 new toolkit guides, which provide guidance, templates, tools, and case studies to help you create an inclusive and welcoming environment for anyone experiencing mental health problems, and that will help them to become physically active. That's about all from us today, but do get in touch if you have any questions and make sure to explore our resources, both in this area and moving forward from the ones that we develop with our young people. I think that's it from me, so I'll pass back to Gary now.
Oh, it's not Gary, it's me, it's Jeanette, and thank you very much to Hayley and to James from Mind. I'm going to hand over now to Martin from the Dame Kelly Holmes Trust. He's going to take us through what they're doing to ensure that Londoners, the young Londoners, are definitely at the forefront of our minds.
Brilliant, thank you very much. My slides are brilliant, thank you. So Martin Talbot from the Dame Kelly Holmes Trust. We're going to kind of take it on a stage. I think the work that Mind have just talked to is fantastic tee-up for our work. In a moment, we're going to move into a session with Claire Bennett, who's a world-class athlete and an ex-Commonwealth champion, and she's going to talk us through some tools and techniques to boost well-being by looking at stress and actually really simple things that we can all do. But also, if you're a practitioner, you can take it back to your school, your leisure setting, local councils, wherever you might be from, and I think that'd be really helpful. But before we do that, I just wanted to give you a quick insight into Trust itself. So unsurprisingly, set up by Dame Kelly, or Kelly at the time, in 2008. And Kelly had a really challenging and difficult background herself. And she kind of understood that actually world-class athletes had amazing, sorry, it's really off-putting the screen I've got in front of me, sorry. She understood, she wanted to have a legacy basically for the work that she did. And she understood that physical activity and mental well-being that the guys from Mind have articulated so well is at the core of everyone's success. And that can be from simple things like doing good presentation today, building good relationships, securing a job, sustaining that job, doing well at school. And she felt that world-class athletes, if we move on to the next slide, had a brilliant role to play in this. Can we just move on to the next slide, please? So I'm not sharing my screen as we discussed. Anyway, so she felt that world-class athletes were in a brilliant place to help young people sort of support their mental and physical well-being. And that's really where the trust was formed from. So we've been in existence for 13 years, since 2008. We work in about 60 to 70 locations across the UK. We operate in community and education settings. We do lots of work here in London as well. And I think the unique thing for us is all of our work is delivered through either current or former world-class athletes. For example, Serena Guthrie there is netball captain, England netball captain. She's over in Australia at the moment. And athletes as a group of individuals and a collective will openly talk about mental health and sometimes sort of nutrition and eating challenges they've had, both potentially during the time as competing, but also afterwards. So once that goal's been achieved, once that time's finished, a lot of athletes are quite open about mental health challenges that they currently or have previously suffered from, and we tend to find that sort of engagement from that openness is a really good way to work with young people. We have a really kind of strong curriculum of activities that help young people go through a journey. And that journey is to help them to be the best version of themselves. And we really understand, like the guys from Mind said, that actually little changes and sustaining them, I think Hayley mentioned from Mind, sustaining those changes is fundamentally important to anybody's success and their general well-being. And I say our athletes have come from a unique background to do that. If you've been the fastest, the best, the quickest at something, your leadership skills, your communication skills, your teaming skills, depending on the support you were doing, and your resilience and your ability to overcome adversity, they come from a different place from maybe you and I would do. When you put that together with the Trust curriculum, I just think we put ourselves in a really strong place to help young people. And on that, I'd like to hand over to Claire, who's going to tell you, or take you through some simple techniques to sort of tackle stress, which I say can be used yourselves, but also potentially put into practice with young people that you work with in London. So if I could hand over to Claire and go to the next slide, please.
Thank you, Martin, and hello everybody, hope everyone's well. So just as a really quick introduction about myself, Martin's already mentioned, but I represented Great Britain at the European and World Championships in fencing, and I have been doing so since the age of 14. I've now retired after London 2012, and as captain of the England team, we won bronze and team gold at the 2010 Commonwealth Games, which was an amazing experience. I'm proud to say that I've been working with the Dame Kelly Holmes Trust as an athlete mentor for the past 8 years now, actually, and it's something that I'm hugely passionate about. Supporting and developing young people to help them achieve their potential is just an amazing thing. So in this session, we're going to be just sort of listed a few of these session outcomes. We're going to look at how physical activity can positively affect someone's mental health. We all know that. We're going to understand how stress impacts on our mental health, and we're going to understand how to manage stress effectively through positive coping strategies. So hopefully you'll all be able to have some takeaways with you today. We could go to the next slide, that'd be fab. So for me, the key to achieving mental well-being is to have an equal balance of good physical and mental health. Physical activity has a huge potential to enhance our well-being. Even just a short burst of 10 minutes walking, a brisk walk, can really help our mental alertness, our energy, puts in a positive mood for the rest of the day. Preparation and participation in regular physical activity, I think, can help increase our self-esteem and reduce stress and anxiety. I saw firsthand, especially when I was an athlete, competing and training every single day, how physical activity can make a huge difference on yourself, and including our young people on our programs. For me, it's given me confidence, it gives me a greater self-esteem, it makes my body feel energized and strong, and it makes me feel happy. I love doing sport. When I'm stressed, I turn to sport, and it's never let me down, to be honest, and it's always been that kind of constant in my life. And I know that my mental health and well-being does improve when I do exercise. So let's talk a little bit about stress now. If we go to the next slide. So what is stress? Stress is the body's response to danger, when it senses danger. We all experience stress. We need it to function, but when it starts interfering with our lives, that's when we know it becomes a problem. I know the guys at Mind said that as well. So next slide as well. I wanted to quickly introduce you to what's called the stress container. So in this stress container model, the size of any person's stress container is usually dictated by that person's tolerance to stress. So for example, if you've got a high tolerance to stress, you're likely to have a big container that can hold all of those live stress factors that you have. If you have a low tolerance to stress, then you're going to have quite a small container that won't be able to hold all of your life stresses. So the size of a person's stress container is really down to the person's individual experiences to date of having stress. And I guess it's very unique to each person. There are kind of coping mechanisms that can help, that can act as a tap. You see that there's a little tap that helps to relieve stress from that stress container. So it might be looking after your diet, it might be doing physical activity, it might be practicing some self-care daily. These are some of the things that can help relieve that stress from your stress container. But there may also be unhelpful coping mechanisms that may block that stress from being released. For example, if you're working late at night every single night, they may be unhelpful coping strategies. And I guess the stress container is really good to help us to ask ourselves the question, are we coping? And if not, then what can we do to help open up that tap and relieve some of that stress? So it's a really good thing to look at in terms of self-awareness. The keys to good stress management are building emotional strength. So that sense of self-awareness, being aware of how your thoughts and your feelings, being in control of the situation, and having a good social network and adopting a positive outlook. And I know that's easier said than done, but I'm going to go through a couple of techniques in a minute to help with that. Next slide, please, if that's okay. So how can we turn stress into wellness? I love this little picture. Again, next slide. Thank you. What I'm going to do, just share with you, these are taken from the NHS website. I wanted to share with you some top 10 stress busters that I think are really simple, but really effective. The first one, be active. I know we've spoken about it loads already, but exercise, it won't help. It won't make that stress completely disappear. Of course it won't, but it will help you to reduce the emotional intensity that you might be feeling, clearing your thoughts and helping you to deal with your problems more effectively. Take control. The act of taking control is in itself empowering, right? Control the things that you're able to control the controllables. I love that expression. You can control things like your eating, your drinking, your thinking, your positive self-talk. It's really, really important. Number 3, connect with people, connecting with your family, your friends. Sometimes they may help you see things a little bit differently. Talking it through with a friend will help you sometimes to find solutions as well. Have some me time. If you're anything like me, I find it quite difficult to carve out any time for me, and I have to really force myself to do it. But everybody needs some relaxation time, and everybody needs to practice self-care and look after yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup, and you have to treat yourself as number one. It's really important. Challenge yourself. So setting yourself goals and challenges is really important. So whether that's at work or outside of work, it might be learning a new language, trying a new sport, that kind of stuff will help build confidence in it, and it will help reduce stress as well. Avoid unhealthy habits. We all know that. Do volunteer work if you can. That does give you a kind of sense of greater life satisfaction. Work smarter, not harder. Okay, so working smarter means prioritising your work, concentrating on the tasks that will make a real difference. Do the hardest tasks first, and then get the rest done. Try to be positive. Trust me, I know it's easier said than done to be positive, but try to look for the positives in life. One thing I do is just write down 3 things that went well every single day at the end of the day, and that helps me to reflect on what I'm grateful for. And then finally, accept the things you can't change. I think this will help give you that freedom and that peace to move on when you're feeling really stressed and everything gets too much. The last thing, if we can move to the next slide, just for the last little bit now, I just wanted to share with you the 5 ways to wellbeing, and there are some crossover with some of the tips that I've just shared just now. But the 5 ways to wellbeing, basically, evidence suggests that there are 5 steps that you can take in order to improve your mental health and your wellbeing. So number 1, we've mentioned it before, connect with people. Connecting with people 100% will help with your sense of belonging, your sense of self-worth, will provide you emotional support when you need it the most. So if possible, try to spend a little bit of time with family or friends each day. And quality time, pick your phone away, have a meal with your family, try switching off the TV, all these kind of things, just connect with other people. The physical activity, I know we've mentioned it before, I won't talk too much about it, but things like taking the lift instead of the stairs, think about how you can carve something in every single day to incorporate a little bit of physical activity. Go for a walk with a friend, have a walk and talk session, so you're nailing the connecting step as well as the physical activity. Have a kickabout in your local park, that kind of stuff. Do some easy exercise like stretching maybe at home. Learn new skills. Again, this helps to boost your confidence and your self-esteem. It gives you a sense of purpose as well. Perhaps you want to try and learn to cook something new. Perhaps you want to get your teeth stuck into a DIY project. How many people did that over lockdown? Might be fixing a bike, whatever it is, try a new hobby, try a new challenge, maybe start writing a blog. Whatever it is that makes you tick, I think can be really helpful. Number 4, give to others. One of my favourite ones, actually, I think, and this isn't about buying gifts to people and giving that to buying things for others. This will really help in terms of giving that sense of reward and that self-worth. So it might be saying thank you to someone for really helping you out one day. It might be spending time with family, friends. It might be just giving someone a smile when you walk down the street. Or volunteering in the community, something like that. This will help you feel really good about yourself, and I think it's really important to try and do in your daily lives. And then finally, take notice. So pay more attention to the present moment, and how you can improve your mental health. So think about your thoughts, your feelings, your body, the world around you. Notice the changing season as we're coming into autumn, the leaves changing colour, that kind of thing. Be curious, savor the moment. So those are the 5 ways to wellbeing. What I wanted to do, just to leave on the final slide, if we can move to the last slide, that'd be fab. I wanted to incorporate a wellbeing goal for you guys for today. So what I want you to ask is just to reflect on how you can incorporate physical activity in what you currently do. Okay, so just spend a couple of minutes writing down how you can incorporate physical activity into your daily life. So it might be walking somewhere instead of driving somewhere, taking the stairs instead of the lift, as I said, maybe walking for half an hour before work, walking the dog, that kind of thing. So I hope you found this kind of bite-sized session useful, with some key takeaways for you to try out at home or to share with your friends and family. And thank you so much for having us and for listening. Martin, I don't know if you wanted to just add something at the end.
No, I think we're done. Thank you very much. That was brilliant, Claire. Some really good questions and comments coming up as well on your piece, so thank you.
Brilliant stuff there from Martin, Claire, Hayley and James. It was really, really good to listen to where we're at when we're thinking about young Londoners. I interact with so many young Londoners in my line of work, in everything that I do, and to be a very former young Londoner, understanding what it means to have the capital city and everything at your disposal, sometimes it doesn't always feel that way. So great tips there, especially from Claire at the end, in terms of dealing with stress and making sure that wellness is right there on top of our priorities. They are the future, so I think that everything has to have a young person focus when we're thinking about how we're going to reinvigorate the capital when it comes down to fitness, activity and wellness. So thank you so much, guys. Really, really interesting session. Remember, please do keep on putting your questions, your comments, connect in that Q&A box on the platform. We want to hear from you. We want your thoughts, we want your feelings. This is a conference for you. This is a conference to make sure that we can get things moving in the right direction. So we are 2 sessions down. We've got another session coming up before lunchtime, and that's reconnecting Londoners to leisure facilities. In and around London, there are tons of leisure facilities. Some you pay for, some you don't. Some you have access to, some you absolutely do not. So we're going to be speaking about that with our panel, and we'll be back here in about 15 minutes. So I'll see you then.